we were on a ship in San Diego filming season 3, and didn't quite have an ending for the season yet. We were still working on it, and me and my assistant and a bunch of us were standing on the quarterdeck right when you get onto the ship, and we're talking to the captain of the ship, and we're just chatting about stuff. And I'm thinking to myself, why is the captain standing here talking to me? I'm sure he's busy with other things, but he's talking to me. And usually those guys will say, hi, good luck to you, have fun, if you need anything, and then they leave. Mm-hmm. Turns out he was waiting for something else to happen. He goes, if you excuse me, I have to go do something now. So I said, oh, sure. Turns out they were doing a bonging off ceremony. One of their officers was leaving the ship. Mm-hmm. I had never witnessed one of these before.
What's it called?
Bonging off.
Bonging?
Or donging off. I think it's bonging off. It's where they ring the bells and they sort of say goodbye to you.
Oh.
So you can't help but feel something's happening. So you see these 2 rows of officers line up, and then out of a covered breezeway comes the officer, and they're announced by a bosun's pipe, mm-hmm. Whatever. Right. And then this person comes out, and everyone's at attention. And I look up, and on every deck there are sailors standing at attention, watching this thing. And meanwhile, my crew they're carrying equipment. They stop. They're just looking, and we're all just watching this thing, thinking, what's going on? And we don't know this person. We don't know the story. So it just feels like you're watching a ritual. And the person, it's a young woman. She walks down the row of officers and then turns 90 degrees and salutes the captain and says, permission to go ashore for the last time.
Aww.
And I start to kind of well up with tears. And he says, permission granted. So they salute, they shake hands, and then she stands and she walks across the brow off the ship. And as she's walking, they start going, hip, hip. And the whole ship goes, hooray, hip, hip, hooray. And then right as she reaches the halfway point, the captain screams or hollers, don't look back. At this point, I'm literally weeping. My assistant's weeping. The grips are weeping. I'm like, that's the end of our season right there. And now it turns out she was going to Hawaii. She was fine. This was not like she was just being reassigned to like a cooler post.
Right.
But all that ritual and the idea of don't look back, that's biblical. It's like sort of like Sodom and Gomorrah thing. Don't look back.
Yeah.
Comes from that. I'm not sure why, because she turns into salt, mm-hmm. salt in the sea. All these kinds of little symbolism. It's sort of like Halo. There's all these kinds of canonical Easter eggs in the Navy that have been built up over 240 some years. And that season we were doing the captain, leaving the ship. Well, we knew he was going to cross a line morally and he was going to have to leave. And that became the last image, was don't look back. And it just happened serendipitously because we were there. And that comes from being fully immersed in the work and loving it and wanting to do it, not looking at it like just a job. And I think that's the key is you can't write cynically. If you're going to, like when I was on The Closer, it was a cop show. I didn't create the show, James Duff did. It's a mm-hmm. brilliant show. But I learned how to be on a show and how to run a show from being on that show. And again, I had no run-ins with law enforcement growing up. I knew what cops
Now you are from New Jersey.
Well, I grew up with the mafia. I knew a lot about that, but I didn't grow up.
I'm from Brooklyn.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
I had a lot of mafia in my neighborhood growing up, but I didn't have a lot of, cop experience.
Right.
But got into it. We had a great detective on the show who eventually retired and became a full-time producer on the show. And I think if you just fully embrace it and live it, then it shows on the screen. Mm-hmm. I can segue into my new show, Halo. It's the same thing. They've built this over 20 years, this legacy and this canon that, you want to tell your own story, but you want to honor it. And so anytime you can find a way to go back to that and find the depth of meaning in it, because nothing means anything unless it's got roots, right? And so the Navy obviously provided us with that, and the LAPD provides you with that, and the United Nations Space Command also provides you with that. And so I think you go back to your first question about enthusiasm. I think if you get enthusiastic about your project, it becomes all-consuming. Right. You see everything through that lens. You see ideas come to you through that thing. And mm-hmm. if you have that kind of enthusiasm, suddenly you've got a crew who wants to do the same thing. If the crew knows, if we do this, this, and that'll sell what he's talking about, and they're part of it, they get a little bit more meaning as opposed to like, we need an office, give me some desks. You kind of say, no, I want a blue chair. And why a blue chair? Because when he was young, he had a blue toy, and he watched his father get murdered or something, and blue became the color of memory, whatever.
Right.
For you, if it means something, you can assign meaning to it. It's like Storaro would assign meaning to every color that he would do lighting with. Yellow is is power, and red is this. If you have your own, even if it's your own meaning, if you can sell that vision to your crew and to your writing staff and to the network and get them all to buy in, then you know. And that takes time. The last ship, it took a couple seasons before we really had buy-in, where skepticism went down from the network about the budget, from the Navy about our intentions, and from our audience.
Right. Yeah, but it's great though. Again, going back to that point of finding people or inspiring people who share that enthusiasm. I remember on Stitches, I had my line producer, a guy named David Russell, who, as much as I love Stitches and I loved Stitches, Russell loved the show even more. And that's who you want as your line producer. You want, it literally going back to like the airplane. I walked into his office and I was like looking a little downcast, and he was like, what's wrong? I had this really great idea for an episode, but we can't do it. He goes, well, why not? He goes, because it takes place in an airplane. And he goes, well, give me a moment or two. Right. And I go back to the writer's room, and he walks in like an hour later. He goes, okay, I got you your airplane. And it's like, I was just convinced. It's like, there's no way we're shooting, an episode in an airplane, filled with passengers. And he would not, he thought he liked the idea, and it was like, he just was enthusiastic.
Yeah, if you enlist people, I remember going down the hall to the visual effects team and saying, I'm tired, I can't just keep doing stuff at sea where they come across a boat. I want to do something maybe like, can we shoot at one of those oil rigs off the coast of Santa Barbara, and make it like a cool scene there, and would you be able to work with that? And he came back with a plan. We talked about doing a storm at sea. We had never done a storm. It was always sunny. And I said, it's time we did a storm at sea. And we had to prepare for that for 6 months before the director even showed up with, how do we make the set watertight, so that we could splash water around? How do we deal with the visual effects of seeing a ship in a storm? How do we pay for that? So by the time we were shooting it, we had done 6 months of prep, and everyone was so on board.
Right.
And same thing with Halo. Like, as big as our budget was, it was never big enough to do what our imaginations wanted it. So, you would have these amazingly brilliant artists coming together and figuring out ways to solve your problems. And look, I did, for 9 episodes, I think I did 270 drafts.
Wow. Of all of them.
Of all of them. So something like 30, 40, depending on the episode. Some as few as 15, 10, some as many as probably 40. Not full rewrites, but changes. You lost this location. This has to change. This has to make more sense.
How big was your writing staff for Halo?
It was mostly just me. And then when I first got the job, there was a team that had been working for some time on scripts.
Well, Halo apparently was in development hell for almost a decade.
Yeah. In fact, when I was on the last ship, I remember hearing about friends of mine who were working on Halo, and I'm thinking, oh, that sounds cool. That might be a cool job. So yes, they had a lot of false starts or learning experiences, and eventually they found Kyle Killen, and he created a great shape, got some writers together, and created some really good, literally carved out of the huge and horizontally wide canon of Halo, carved a story out of it, and they were gung-ho. And then he didn't want to continue. He didn't want to go to Hungary, and he had young children, and just wasn't interested in living in Hungary.
Right.
And so I came on board, and it was sort of, can you just run production in Hungary and maybe do some production rewrites? And then as we started going, it became, actually, we need to keep developing the show. And so Kyle was great. We worked together for a bit, and then he stepped away, and I continued, and so we ended up developing the show together.
So had he already kind of broken the back of, like, how do we take this canon, for this 20-year?
Yeah, he did so much of the heavy lifting. He basically said, this is what I think the story should be for the season.
Right.
And then I took that and said, okay, let's develop that and flesh it out. And, they either ran out of time or just didn't get a chance to sort of make every episode fit with every episode that comes after. There was, clearly like first drafts of different episodes where this doesn't even happen anymore in this episode. So, and then, I think 343 and Showtime and Amblin also, they were all struggling with what they wanted the show to be, or they knew it and they just hadn't gotten their point across. So it became an opportunity for everyone to sort of reevaluate what we have. And so it was hard for me because I was sort of caught in the middle.
When you say reevaluating what they wanted the show to be, do you mean like just tonally, or like out of all of this, we want this story?
I think it's all those things.
Okay.
I think sometimes it was like, yeah, that scene's always been in there, but we never liked it. Or we never really cracked this moment, but we were working on it. Or me coming in saying, well, what if we do this? And they go, oh, that's interesting. And I think what happened was I actually came in, and so I got 2 writers for 3 weeks. And there were writers I trusted. I worked with Katie Swain and Mark Malone. I worked with them on Last Ship. And it was because I had like literally no time. I was like, you're going to go to Hungary in about a month, so you better get going. So I got 2 writers. We got a temporary writer's room and an assistant, and just started taking what was there, pulling out what we thought didn't work, reshaping it, bringing in new ideas, and then pitching it back, and then saying, okay, great, let's do that. You're off to Hungary. And then the first drafts that came in, everyone got a little bit anxious because for 2 years they've been doing something else. And now here I am, they don't know me very well, and I'm coming in with a brand new idea. And so there was a little pushback, so I kind of went back and reinstated some stuff. And then when we got to the table read a few months later, they said, wait, why don't we do something else? I said, well, that's what I talked about doing a few months ago. Let's go back to that. Sure. And so it became a sort of feedback loop. And then from that point on, it became all of us discovering the show together.
Right.
And obviously 343 and Microsoft have a huge investment emotionally and canonically in making this thing right. And so it was like it was with the Navy. It was a sort of feedback loop of like, can I push the envelope here? Can I try this? And what was great was they were really open to us expanding on canon, moving away from the timeline of the game to create a new thing for the show. At the same time, they were great to answering questions for me, so I could put in all the Easter eggs and that kind of stuff. Right. And so it became like I got a leg up, from the previous writing team. I didn't start from complete scratch, but at the same time, in some ways it was more challenging because I had sort of like, here's your house, the foundation we like, just redo the kitchen. And then you finish the kitchen and they go, well, now the living room looks really weird, doesn't it? Yeah, let me redo that. But don't forget, there's a retaining wall here. So you're sort of, or I like to use the metaphor of building train tracks for the train as the train's going 100 miles an hour. You're sort of trying to build in front of it.
I haven't heard that before. I like that.
And you're sort of, there's a mountain ahead. We got to drill a tunnel at the same time because production was going to happen. So as a result, it became, a 70-hour-a-week job, especially when I was in Hungary and I didn't have my writers anymore. The writers would come and go for a week or two or a month, sometimes a month to help me do prep. But I did every single rewrite after that. So I was literally, writing on set and then at night on calls. And
I was actually looking it up, on the top 200 franchises. I don't remember what number it was. It was in the 30s, I think, in franchises. You are, I think, you're either just, like Halo is either just behind or just ahead of the DC Extended Universe in terms of franchise value.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I can tell you how surprising it is to find out how many people are interested in Halo or know Halo is when you mention it. Like I was on a plane back from Seattle when I first went up to Seattle to meet the people at 343 and go to they have a boot camp where you learn everything Halo. And it's amazingly very little about the actual gameplay and more about the canon and the core values, creating awe and wonder and hope and all that stuff. Anyway, so I'm flying back from Seattle, and the guy next to me, we're chatting up, and I said, oh yeah, I was just up, I'm doing this adaptation of a game called Halo. The guy in front of me takes off his headphones and says, Master Chief, Halo? And my wife went to the doctor once, and she mentioned her husband's going out of town to do this thing. Oh, what's it about, Halo? He was a huge fan. So it's in the culture for sure. And yeah. I'm trying to not think about the immense pressure from the hardcore fan base who are going to literally freeze frame every shot to make sure we haven't screwed something up. In fact, we were on one of our weekly 4-hour visual effects calls yesterday, where we're all now, of course, working from home, but we have our monitors up and we're talking. It's me and the director in London and the post-production in Canada and the people in Microsoft. And we go through something like 300-400 shots every week, and we're looking like, is that reflection look good? Is that the right logo? Is that armor looking exactly right? Because we know that diehard fans will literally parse and nail us for everything. Now we're looking for, of course, water bottles and N95 masks, in the actors' pockets and that kind of stuff.
Right.
But yeah, I never think about the enormity of the budget or the enormity of the pressure, because I really think when you're making your show, whether you're making a 2-person talkie show or a 500-person, rock opera, whatever you want, military thing, you still have the same challenges, which is telling your story.
Right.
So it's only when people say, "Gee, that's a big budget," that I start going, "Oh, wow, that is kind of
right." And you don't want to make. I mean, nobody sets out to make something crappy, or because the budget on this is
Right.
so much less than the budget on my last one, I'm going to take this that percentage less
Yeah,
seriously.
yeah. I would say I was going to say it's just as hard to make a smaller show as it is a bigger show, and that's true in terms of content, drama, character, emotion, engagement. What makes the bigger show more challenging is that it's that plus, all right, how do we get the equipment to this distant,
Right.
quarry in the middle of Hungary, and get these shots to look right, and get the armor to look right, and what's the blue screen and the visual effects and the cost and feeding 1,000 people, all that stuff becomes much more of a to do.
Well, it's a bigger army
Yeah,
that
you also have a
you're
bigger
moving
team.
around. Right,
Yeah.
right.
So.
But arguably, you could say making a smaller show it's not that it's more difficult, because I've worked on small shows, I've worked on big shows. So it's not that a small show is more difficult, it's more challenging because you have to be more resourceful.
Right.
It's not like, I had a friend who famously would say, well, any problem that goes away when you throw money at it is not really a problem.
Right.
Right. So on a bigger show, there's at least a little more wiggle room to throw some money at the problem to make it
Right.
go away. On a smaller show, it's like, nope,